Thank you very much for spending a little of the brief time that you are here in Chicago. I appreciate it very much. It seems that for quite a number of years, your symphonies were languishing, and now they have emerged again with ever-increased vigor. Does this give you a special sense of joy to have the symphonies and other music come back again?
Well, I'll answer the first part of your statement. They never languished. That seems to be part of a mythology that started I don't know how. I think what happened was that I languished. I disappeared from the United States of America at a time that it was very, very difficult to live here, called the McCarthy period. And I went to Italy to live, and so naturally the moment you move away, you leave things in the hands of your publisher. The music was always there, available to conductors if they wanted it. And indeed, Mr. Bernstein, while I was away, all those years that they so-called say that the music languished, if they only would do their homework sometimes, these people who set up this story, they would realize that Mr. Bernstein gave premieres of 3 symphonies in the so-called years that the music languished.
Well, there were always a few performances, but it seems now there's a bigger resurgence, or is that just perhaps perception?
I think it's the recording that has done that.
Okay.
The performances seem, well, no, Mr. Schwartz is the one who's playing the music like mad, but I haven't seen Mr. Slatkin or anybody else jump in and go along.
That's true.
And the recording has been out since July, or the publishers say there have been inquiries. But I can't say that there has been any improvement in the so-called interest. What is different is that they're all younger conductors today, some whom I had as students at the Juilliard School in my classes, who haven't shown the slightest interest, and said they would when they were in my classes, when they got orchestras of their own, and they have. But people like Andrew Litton, who's in Bournemouth, and was in Washington as assistant to Rostropovich, he hasn't played a note of mine yet. So you see, there's the problem.
I see. Well, is there anything you can do or even should do to get your music even more widely performed?
I think there are young composers today who've made a career of promoting their own music. They do nothing but go from city to city and peddle their scores. I'm too old for that. You know, at 75, you can't do it. I'm glad that I can just get my teaching done. I live in Rochester. I have to commute to New York once a week and wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, make a flight going in one time, flight coming back at 5. So it's not easy. But there are young composers who do it, and if they enjoy doing it, we'll let them do it. All power to them if they think that conductors will do it that way. But I know the conductors have told me they can't stand these young conductors coming around and annoying them, and they always say, why don't they send their tapes and scores? And the young composers say, well, the conductors won't listen to them. My own students, I advise not to do that.
Not to go around?
No.
What should they do?
They should simply send their scores with tapes. If the works are good, very, very good. For example, I have a brilliant doctoral student graduated from Juilliard last year named Lowell Lieberman, and Lowell is getting along very well. I thought his first symphony, which he had written with me as his doctoral program, was so fine, and he was only then 25. He had studied with me when he was 18 and then came into the school as a regular student. Now, Lowell sent the score to Schwartz at my suggestion. Schwartz listened to the tape, the reading and performance at Juilliard, and said, my God, this is a wonderful work, performed with the Seattle Symphony. And even now commissioned the work for his New York Chamber Symphony from him. So you see, there are ways of it happening.
Well, but of course, Mr. Lieberson had a little bit of extra push with the name of Mr. Diamond attached to it.
Maybe, I don't know. But other young composers have people who could promote them and encourage them too.
Now, this young man, obviously,
Lowell Lieberman, yes.
He's an outstanding example. Are there other, you don't need to give me a laundry list of names, but are there others who are on that level coming along? Or is
yes, strangely along, they're my students, and everybody can't get over that. They're the ones that are really making the big thing in America. There is Darren Hagen, who has been performed now by major orchestras, Philadelphia orchestras, as a matter of fact, and there are many, many more.
Well, what is it about your teaching that makes a composition student ready to really produce a worthwhile work?
Well, I do what those teachers at university-based teachers don't do. I give them a thorough traditional training. They have to really prove to me that they can do everything in traditional harmony, chorale harmonization, contrapuntal, florid counterpoint, fugal writing, orchestration, but really orchestration, not the silly ways that teach orchestration at universities.
What's a silly way?
A silly way is assign them a short Schumann piece from the album for the young, or a movement from a Beethoven sonata, and say orchestrate it for chamber orchestra or for large orchestra and things like that.
And so what is the correct way?
The correct way is to simply give them an assignment like take the opening of your idea for what you think will be a sinfonietta or any short orchestral piece, and show me how you will go about orchestrating a piece. How do you begin? What do you begin with? Do you make a sketch first? Do you have a piano version? If they show me that they have made a version for the piano, and I say that's wrong. It can't be for the keyboard because you're fishing from notes from the keyboard. You're not hearing it in your head, and you're not hearing it in terms of the orchestra. So how shall we do it then, Mr. Diamond?
That's all right.
Oh,
We were talking about the good way and the bad way of
Yes.
teaching orchestration. It seems then, from what you say, that instead of giving them a pattern and letting them make the clothes, you're asking them to design their own pattern as well as tailor the clothing.
well, to actually give them a technique in which I show them how Strauss made his sketches before orchestrating. 3 lines, 4 lines, what you hear. I show them Debussy's sketch, or La Mer, the sketch for La Mer, which is in the library in Rochester, and I live there, and so I bring them Xeroxes of it. Show them Debussy's arrangement on 3 lines, not on piano, indicating in colored pencil, this is the harp, this is the horn, this is the first and second violins.
Well, but is this something that they can really do before they really develop their inner ear?
Oh, well, the orchestration comes after they've mastered the elementary techniques of composition. Orchestration is something that evolves after you've studied counterpoint and harmony and chorale harmonization and figured bass and all that.
Well, do you feel that people with better inner ears then can go even farther with their own creative designs?
And do what you mean? I don't quite...
Rather than, would someone with a limited capacity for hearing things in their ear be better off doing things at the piano? Would that help them at all?
No. They still would not be hearing what they hear in their inner ear in terms of the orchestra. They would be hearing it as piano music, chordally. How can you possibly play on the piano what you might be, if it were the other way, thinking of a 3-part fugal section in the middle of a symphony? Just try to manipulate that. So what they do is, they do this, you see, and they get chords, but they don't hear lines. So how do they know the first violins are going to come in there, the violas here, the piccolos up there? They're thinking only of this.
I see. And that then is the wrong way to do it.
I think it's wholly the wrong way. Now, Stravinsky used to have work at the piano only, but he had his sketches. He had a special extraordinary accoutrement on the piano. He had a big board with attachments and things to line up staves to make his sketches.
Now, I assume that this way that you're encouraging your students to work is the way you have worked all your life.
All my life. Probably because I was trained as a violinist and piano was secondary. Violinists or other instrument players, they usually, if they're composers, they work that way. Pianists, I think, in our time, have the worst compositional techniques because they don't hear linearly.
Even for piano?
Oh no, for piano they're fine,
Okay.
but writing for the orchestra, they have no conception. They write piano music which they then have to arrange for orchestra.
Well, if you find someone who is so attached to the piano, do you encourage that person then to write piano music?
If I think that they have a bigger potential and that they can write for orchestra too, if they've shown me in some little exercise I asked them to do that there is a technique there, then I encourage them to write for the orchestra. What's the point of writing piano sonatas if you really don't have a good enough technique anyway?
I see.
I mean, how can you write a fugue for the piano if you don't have enough counterpoint?
Well, of course, Hindemith took that to the extreme and learned
right.
every instrument before he
There you are.
Well, is that then the right way to do it?
The right way to do it is his way, because he made sketches like crazy and sometimes orchestrated right into the score. He didn't even have preliminary sketches. He would write a whole symphony. A symphony for band is written that way, right into score.
Huh. But the ideas come right out onto the page in 15 or 20 lines.
Right.
Huh. Amazing. Have you written anything for band?
I just finished last year. That's very strange. This man who just called me, Jack Stamp, commissioned 2 years ago, 3 now actually, a work, I forget what they call it, where several university bands commission work, and it's a piece I call Tantivy, based on the old da-da-da-da-da-da-da, the hunting call. And it turned out very well, and it's been played by almost all of the people who commissioned it, and will be. It's already recorded by the University of Cincinnati band, but there's going to be a commercial one released with Frederick Purnell. Then there's another one called Hearts Music, which will go along very nicely with that piece.
Is the technique really at all different writing for band as for orchestra?
Very different.
Really? How so?
Other side of the well, when you have no strings for supporting harmony, you have you don't have any kind of color that resembles the string section. So you have to completely invent a way of getting that lyric quality, which the band can produce if you know how to write for the high winds, particularly clarinets, flutes, oboes. So there is enough possibility.
Would you raise violent objections then if someone took one of your orchestral works and tried to orchestrate it for band?
Couldn't be done.
Oh, someone could make it work.
They've tried.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And it doesn't work.
They can't, because the music is so contrapuntal. For example, the Fifth Symphony that's being done here would be impossible to arrange that for band because of the big fugue that ends it. Has a huge organ climax. How are you going to get that into the band?
Add a calliope?
Maybe.
Well, when you're working on a piece of music, do you know before you start that it's going to be an orchestral work or chamber work or piano work or band work?
Oh yes, sure. If it's not an out-and-out commission piece, you always have a conception that you hear, and so you always know what it is you're going to write.
When you start making your sketches, do you know where it's going to end up, or are you ever surprised where it ends up?
Oh, I'm often surprised. Yes, it never ends up where I think.
Is that good?
Not even in the tonality, I think.
Are these good surprises?
Oh yes, I think so. But sometimes I change them because they don't work out in terms of equilibrium. I mean, I may have a total surprise in the key that I end up in, or in the kind of fast ending when I had planned a slow ending. This symphony that they're doing here, I originally had imagined as having a fast last movement. Instead, it ends with one solo cello playing all by his little self.
Well, when you're working on these sketches, are you always controlling that pencil, or are there times when that pencil really takes your hand?
I don't know where it comes from, except what my sketchbooks have down as the material. But what makes one note follow the other is something that has never been able to be explained by anyone. You can explain any other field of art, but not the art of music. The subliminal life that creates notes, abstract notes, which have absolutely no meaning whatsoever, as pitches, or even a series of notes. I mean, if somebody hadn't told you we had not had that horrendous war, and somebody hadn't put victory for da-da-da-dum, like you do this, you wouldn't know that this means that. Somebody said that that's V for victory, and you know that that's Beethoven 50, that's supposed to represent victory, and that's that. But music can't tell us that. So it's a completely abstract art unless you have a program, and you need a book to tell you what the plot. I defy anybody to really listen to The Sorcerer's Apprentice and know what that's about if you hadn't known what the storyline is.
Well, then, is it a mistake, then, that we all come with our conceptions of Mickey Mouse and the brooms?
Oh, no. No, if you've seen Fantasia and all the other things, that's fine. That's what you can do in illustrating music.
I guess I'm trying to figure out which comes first then, the scene in the composer's mind or the notes that create the scene.
If it's program music, like my Romeo and Juliet music, or my music for The Tempest, you have a play, you are asked to write incidental music. You have character, you are inspired by these wonderful plays, and so ideas come a little easier there. Or if you write an opera, you have words.
Of course, there's a text and a scenario.
And so you have much more to work with.
Well, if you're writing a piece and it starts to sort of sound like something, do you continue with making it sound more like that, or do you let it go itself?
No, I think if you're any kind of artist, you know that things can go on just so long, and then you need what is called contrast. And above all in music, if you don't have contrast, then you have boredom, and that's the trouble with a great deal of what they call minimalist music today. I can't sit through more than 3 minutes of Philip Glass because I begin getting hives. And John Adams, the Nixon in China, I thought if he doesn't stop going up and down the scales and get started, then I'll have to get out. And indeed, I had to walk out after a while.
And yet it fascinates so many people.
I don't think it fascinates them. I think it just sort of, they're told that that's what the new music is. You know, actually, music goers, unless they are, let's say, highly cultivated music listeners, will do what they're supposed to do. I look around often to see what audiences are like. And I can tell pretty well by the way they react to music. I remember the moment they began listening to a John Adams piece that was very noisy and very fast. 5 of them flew out. And I didn't think it, I thought, well, this was a John Adams piece that was more interesting than all those scales that he wrote. Mm-hmm. It was fast and furious, and the name is a funny one, something Fast Ride in a Small Car or something like that.
Oh, yes.
And before it was over, I thought, well, all right, if you want. But I think there are certain kind of young composers today who write gimmick pieces, and then they turn to something else. But that's something our particular century, the latter 25 years, has produced, which I find very sad.
So it's like just putting on the latest fashions from Paris or Milan.
It's commercialism, yes. They get involved. They're promoters. They work in a commercial world with a recording company, and the recording companies tell them what to do, and they found that this is a way of making a lot of money, and it's very easy music to write. You repeat 24 bars, the copyist makes a lot of money, but really they don't write that many notes that change too often.
I'm just wondering if when you're sitting listening to an Adams piece, if you're not instinctively thinking, well, I could make it go here, and we could do this, and this would be fine, and take it around, and then you find that it's stalled in the one place.
No, I never react to that. Every time I hear music of that type, particularly Glass, not Steve Reich, he's the one that interests me the most, because I find there's a big humanity, a deep, for example, there's a piece he wrote called Tehillim, which is an extraordinary work. Yeah. But I think with Adams and Glass, the musical materials are so dull that you just don't, it doesn't matter one way or another. I feel, gee, isn't that strange that that's what they want to do and that's sufficient for them?
I've wondered if perhaps it's a reaction to the compression of music in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that the music became so dense that it was, like one of these supernovas that just sort of implodes on itself and then has to explode and begin again with nothing and start with then one piece plus nothing and then two pieces plus nothing, and we're still there and working outward.
That could be, but why didn't they realize that when they were writing that kind of music? I used to tell them. I wrote articles and I would give lectures, and they would hate me for it, and would sometimes boo me in public when I would be speaking about this. I would always say, well, why are they doing this? I mean, don't they know they're alienating an entire public? Don't they know that human beings need spiritual values in music, that they are not interested in fun and games? Maybe it's I who lack humor. I can't even stand Peter Schickele. You see, some people love that. Some people like going to see Charles Ludlam plays, or men playing drag queens, a man as Camille, or those who went back to Carnegie Hall to hear a woman named Anna Russell, a pathetic creature who couldn't sing anymore, and they would go and adore and yell bravo, and this poor unfortunate woman, just knew that she was terrible, but
Now, that was more, I think, for the past.
Yes, but you see, why do people like to do that? That's to me a kind of humiliation of a woman who may once have sung very well. But when you get full Carnegie Hall with a bunch of these crazy, crazy people at that time when she sang, believe me, New York City had the weirdest people from downtown who came uptown to just attend her concerts. But then, as I say, I may be the culprit. I'm not humorless. I find some things quite funny. But I think when we live in times that are tragic enough, that is not the kind of way to use humor, but to humiliate. Humor should be used to be constructive, like Sid Caesar and Imogen Coca and
Exactly.
things like that.
Well, let me ask a great big philosophical question then. Where is music going today?
Right back to where it was, which makes me very happy.
Do you feel you've been vindicated?
Oh, yes. Yes. It's all coming young, the very ones that were once young now. Even John Adams, somebody told me, has just recorded a work of mine that I wrote way back in 1938, my Elegy in Memory of Ravel, which he's done in the string version on a record of American string music. And I was surprised because I thought for sure he knows how badly I think of all his. I like earlier pieces of it, like the Harmony Lair and things like that. But when he began going up and down the scales, that was just a little too much.
Well, have we essentially lost 25 or 30 years of musical composition?
That is one of the most tragic things that has happened in music. And in Europe, it has not stopped. They're still losing all that because their music, all art, is subsidized by government. So you have Mr. Stockhausen still knocking everybody's heads out with so much sound they go mad. None of his works of the past have gone into the repertoire. You know, when a composer has been around as long as Stockhausen and not three pieces, not even the piano pieces, are taken up by anyone and played again, it's a rather sad commentary.
Well, how do you account then for the fact that he does draw at least some audiences?
Well, look at the audiences. They're the same ones who follow the Polish festival of no music, the ones who follow John Cage. Look at John Cage, for example.
Sure.
So you see, it's a faddist thing in Europe because the money is there to promote it. Why did Elliott Carter have to go to Europe to make his name? He made his name there because there was no money to support what he was trying to do with his music. But Elliott announced to everybody that he did not want a public. His first quartet, he said, I don't care whether a public likes it or not. I'm writing this for myself. We are old friends, Carter and I, from way back. And I think, and he knows that I know this, and we've discussed it, he knows that he's made a big mistake somewhere, and his music is little by little coming back to more traditional values.
Is it like society that is coming more and more, little by little, back to traditional values?
That society is doing it in a way that worries me a little. It's doing it in the horrible way I found in the 50s, which is it's getting a rightist bigot slant, and it worries me.
So we're going to get a new McCarthy coming, and we'll all leave again.
If there is, I don't think anybody's going to allow him to exist, because while we, so-called leftists, as they call us, are still around, and there are many more, and they haven't died out, we will make life very unhappy for them. Even around here, this Skokie business that happened not too long ago, I hear a new Yiddish National Theater is giving a series of performances there. Well, could that have happened when those skinheads and all the other monsters were out?
Exactly. In a way, it's sort of ironic that one of the great classical writers of tonal music should be such a leftist and label himself a leftist. I mean, for some reason, it doesn't seem to add up, and yet it makes a perfect harmony within you.
That I didn't understand. How do you mean? That's exactly what a good socialist-minded composer should be. He should think in terms of human beings. Beethoven did, Mozart and Haydn did, Bach certainly did. He wrote directly for human beings. You see, what happened was that my generation and the older generation, when we began, we were writing for human beings. We had good We had good teachers. Aaron Copland was writing wonderful advanced music, but it was all music for human beings. El Salón Mexico, his experiences in Mexico. Sure. Leonard Bernstein, Kaddish Symphony, Jeremiah Symphony, bless his soul. Today we don't have great souls in young composers except my students. No, I exaggerate now.
Well, I think perhaps you find the great souls in the students who come to you, and you bring that out.
Yes, and I've also met some other wonderful young people. There are some right here in Chicago who came to a couple of rehearsals. They seem very interesting. I wish I had had a little more time to talk with them, but they seem to know a lot about my music. They had been listening to the new Schwartz recording, the first that will come out of my symphonies, and they were most interested in my music, and that's a good sign.
Well, let me ask the other great big philosophical question. What is the purpose of music in society?
To give human beings spiritual values which will help make life more supportable. Otherwise, life can be an agony on earth. One agony, 1 minute after another. And if music, well, why do you have so many stations playing Baroque music and religious music? I turned the station on you have here. It's mostly, I would say, Baroque, although I heard 2 of my pieces on today and a couple of other contemporary works. But why is there such a need for people to hear Baroque music as much as they do? Why do they like it so much? Why do they listen to so much romantic music? Even if they're lay listeners, there is a fulfillment emotionally. Why do they like Jerome Kern's songs? Why do they like George Gershwin's songs? Steve Sondheim or Bernstein's, whether it's in his more serious music or whether it's Candide or West Side Story. These are men who have given music that communicates, and I won't even use the word accessibility, but communication, which is on a deeper, more profound level, that every human being on this earth can understand and appreciate and be moved by. That's the main thing, emotionally moved by.
Now, when you say every human being on the earth, I assume, though, that you're acknowledging a basic understanding of the Western musical language.
No. Hundreds of people who sing all over the world, everywhere, who sing in choruses on Christmas Eve when they sing Messiah or Israel in Egypt or Elijah of Mendelssohn. Those are the people that I'm talking about. They're not trained musicians.
No. But I mean, for instance, are you leaving out the cultures of India and Asia?
Oh, and on the contrary, I think by now we know their music very well. Thank heavens the immigration has changed. When I was a child, Italians came in mainly as immigrants. My parents, Russian Jews, and all the others came at the beginning of the century. Now it's that wonderful influx, and they've changed our culture so much for the better because, one, they've introduced the feeling of patience into life. It's a joy to go to an Oriental restaurant, whether it's Asian Indian or whether it's Chinese, because for a feeling you get away from the monstrosity of our Caucasian, nasty, rude behavior of waiters that you get almost everywhere. But with them, it's politeness from beginning to end. They're on a much different spiritual level than we are.
Well, has your music been played in India and Asia?
That I don't know, because I don't know whether they have big... I know that years ago in Shanghai, my first symphony, second, third, they were fourth was performed. Chamber music, Sigeti used to play my sonata when he traveled abroad to Japan.
I just wondered what the reaction of non-Western audiences was to this.
Very interesting. I went once when Sigeti did this sonata in Hong Kong, and I must say it was almost the reaction of a Western audience, even more, I would say, much more, because he had tremendous following, particularly as a violinist.
How are performers doing these days? Are they getting better and better as we go along? You've been listening to performances of your music and other music all these years.
Oh, they're better than ever at the Juilliard School. I can't believe it sometimes. Right now, they're preparing the concert of all of my orchestral music that Gerard Schwartz will be conducting for my 75th birthday at Avery Fisher Hall on November 14th. And we had to choose at school, sponsored by Juilliard, we had to choose, because everything is by competition, to play with orchestra. So we had the competition for my Kaddish for cello and orchestra. And I listened to 7 of them. I found out later 2 were students of Zara Nelsova, three were former students of Leonard Rose, and they were magnificent. And Dorothy DeLay produces incredible creatures like Midori and all the other wonderful young violinists that she has coming out, and of course Yehudi Menuhin. So performers are better technically than ever.
Well, they are better technically, that's true. Are they better musically?
That we will have to wait and see, because if a Gerard Schwartz could have been one of the great trumpet players and first trumpet of the New York Philharmonic for years, and like a Toscanini cellist in an orchestra in South America who turns out to be one of the greatest conductors later on, that tells us something too. So we must wait for the younger ones to develop. Gerard Schwartz has, I think, an orchestra now in Seattle that I would say is almost as good as the Chicago Symphony.
It's getting right up there.
He's ready to bring them into New York. They've just, listened to the recording of my first, listen to the fourth and second symphonies. You'd think this is the old Boston Symphony.
I assume then that you're extremely pleased with these new recordings that are coming out.
Well, I'm more pleased that the review, there isn't one bad review of that first review. Chicago, for example, had one of the most wonderful reviews of it.
Do you feel then that making these recordings of your works inhibits other interpretations of your work?
I don't think so. No. As a matter of fact, Schwartz asked to hear the old Kusevitsky performance that was taken off the air in '44 at the premiere, and it is indeed very different from what Schwartz does. Mm-hmm. But I love what Schwartz does in his way, because he gives a vitality to the last movement, which Kusevitsky, as a 70-year-old man, could not quite do. On the other hand, Schwartz's interpretation of the Fourth Symphony, which Leonard Bernstein recorded and played often, and I was never really happy with his way.
With Bernstein's way?
Yes.
Okay.
And we would talk about why I didn't like it. And he said, I'll try to do it as close as you want it. And this is way back in 1948. And he said, I'll do my best. But I have a feeling I want to slow it up a little bit here. And I said, well, please don't. You didn't write it. Do what I say. He said, but I don't feel it that way. But you see, already then he had very strong convictions about what he felt in terms of interpretation. So now I'm finally hearing the recording of Schwartz's, which is the way I wanted, not the way Bernstein wanted it.
Who's right?
Schwartz.
Well, how much flexibility do you allow or do you want in terms of interpretation in your scores?
As much as the conductor wants. For example, Michael Morgan is performing the Fifth Symphony, which Bernstein gave the premiere of. Now that symphony Bernstein did very well. And there isn't much leeway and monkeying around with tempi. So whenever I would find that Bernstein was at the premiere in '66 doing something again that was getting in the way of the piece moving at that point, I would tell him, please, you're holding it back. But I feel it. By then there was absolutely nothing you could do. He was on his own track and you couldn't get him to, but by God came the performance and he did it my way. So it was really wonderful that I have a memory of that wonderful, as I have other performances, the Eighth Symphony, the Second Symphony. But I think Schwartz is the one who seems to have a real affinity for my music. And I think he's going to be. He doesn't like when I say it, but I always say, well, you are my musical savior. He said, I know, but I'm not on a cross.
No, hopefully he'll be doing lots more conducting of all of your symphonies. How many are you up to now? 9 or 10?
11.
11, okay. Is there a 12th coming?
No, I'm just finishing the 11th.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, look ahead.
Oh, no, I've got to orchestrate a whole opera with Christopher Keane is planning to give in New York with the City Opera, so I'm afraid that's going to be it.
Which opera is this? Is this the Old David?
No, this is an opera which takes place in present-day Washington shortly after war, called The Noblest Game, which I wrote for the National Opera Institute. But our strange managers, a certain woman named Beverly Sills and a certain person named Julius Rudell, threw screws in the work, so only now that Christopher Keane's there can he unscrew their screwing it up.
Tell me the particular joys and sorrows of writing for the human voice.
Well, I've written over 100 and something songs, and lots of them have gone into singers' repertoire. I always feel comfortable with the voice, and it's always wonderful when you find the right poetry to write songs. But I haven't been able to do too many of them because as I got older and older, I found it takes longer and longer to write music, and you develop physical ailments, and your eyes get bad, and it just takes longer. The physical labor is horrendous. It's tough going.
I assume that the ideas still flow.
The ideas are faster than ever. What I have to do is try to put the damper on. There are so many ideas, and it exhausts me, so I sometimes overwork and pay a bad price for it.
May I ask you to do a station break for us, if you would? Would you read that, put your name in the blank? Classical 97 WNIB?
Hello, this is David Diamond, and you're listening to Classical 97 WNIB in Chicago.
Thank you. Is composing fun?
No, it's agony.
Is it worth it?
Yes. If you can get performances like the one I'm getting here, and if you can have a man like Bernstein perform your music, and all the other great conductors perform my music, Petropoulos, Montreux, God, Stokowski, all of them, then it's worth the agony.
Are you optimistic about the future of music?
Oh, very. So many wonderful talents in music, so many great performers, so many orchestras more than ever, so many wonderful chamber groups, and so many people who love music. My only worry is, and yet I shouldn't, because people are catching on to how bad TV really is, and that the only good thing are the public broadcasting programs. But I must say, sometimes I watch TV and I wonder how in God's name the American public just doesn't rise up and rebel. You know, that it's so ghastly. And also you can't remember one actress or actor from another. The only faces I've seen where I truly can say, yes, I think here these are young people that have faces as well as great talent. As great, the old great star system of Hollywood used to be, a great Garbo, a great Dietrich, you know. But now you have 12, absolutely nothing. You can't remember who they are. They all look alike. And they all have fixed noses, and they all have teeth that are fixed, and so that they're like Andy Warhol silkscreen people. And I must say the only pleasure I've had is, and because David Lynch is an extraordinary talent, that man could. I watch Twin Peaks not so much because I think I know who the murderer is, but I watch Twin Peaks because I think the actors are so fascinating. I think every one of those women are the old silent movie type faces. You can't get them out of your mind. Each one is so different from the other.
You touched one of my buttons. I love silent movies.
Well, of course. Of course, because we had great, great, wonderful spiritual faces like Garbo. Who can ever forget that woman? Even now, one watches Camille and you're a wreck at the end of that picture.
There's a certain innocence and a naivete about even just the techniques of filmmaking then. A genuineness, I think.
I never thought it was naive. I certainly thought of Joseph Sternberg as anything but naive in The Blue Angel, or Clarence Brown in Intruder in the Dust. That's not very naive.
No.
You had to have great directors, but there were some sort of naive approaches to what were called the so-called family pictures, and the Hardy Boys, or whatever they were called, Mickey Rooney when he was a little kid, and all that stuff that Mr. Mayer insisted on. But no, I don't think there was much naivete. I in Rochester, where I live, excuse me, we have Eastman House where the big collection of silent films are. So I see them all the time, and they're really quite extraordinary to see today.
Yeah, I wish we had more of them here. Public television was originally going to do a whole series of them, and it hasn't come as much as
well, they had series of them for years ago. Maybe they'll get. I notice if you wait up, at least in Rochester, if you wait up until 11 o'clock, you might get some really old good ones of Marlene Dietrich, like Dishonored and Morocco, pictures that you can't really get on videotapes still.
Exactly. Thank you for being a composer.
Well, thank you very much for listening to me.
I wish you lots of success with this and lots of continued success
Thank
with
you.
all of the old music and the new music to come.
Thank you very, very much.
Has the premiere been set for the opera? A date?
Christopher Keane is, he's here right now rehearsing in Argento Opera. What he's doing right now is trying to cast, to get an idea, because we need a soprano with an enormous range, high C sharps, good strong solid bottoms. And I listened to Marilyn Shaw last night in Fanciulla. She could be, but she's a little wobbly on high notes, so I'm not sure she's right. But right now he wants to get the casting set, and I have to finish up this symphony for the New York Philharmonic, which is a good year's work, and finish the 10th for Schwartz with Seattle. So I'm begging him to put it off for about 3 years, because the orchestration alone would be close to a year. So he's got casting, and then he'll give me an approximation in about 6 months. He'll give me an idea of a date.
It's a full evening, a full length opera?
It's playing time is 2 hours and 28 minutes as I conducted it through. With an intermission, it'll be probably around 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Well, we look forward to that.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you for coming to Chicago.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.